So June-wise, guys, June's in therapy. We are the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Kristen.
And I'm Dr. Erin.
You are very welcome to our wee corner of the internet, where we are going to have a jam-packed discussion of Season 5, Episode 4 of The Handmaid's Tale, called Dear Offred. Mm-hmm. There's a reason Erin is the detail person, and I'm not, but we got there, guys. Good news.
Trying. We're making it work.
There is a lot of themes in this episode. There's a lot to unpack. A huge part of which is the fact that Luke Bankhole does not seem to understand how international politics work or trauma.
Who Serena Waterford is. He has no idea who she is.
Like, your wife has been... Okay. Anyway, Luke Bankhole is going to be our Mayday moment for this episode. Mayday Moments, for those of you who have not joined us before, is our special Patreon bonus content regarding every episode of The Handmaid's Tale. We have a whole slew of friends joining us over there right now, and we'd love for you to join them. For $5 US or $7 Canadian, link below. You can join us for exclusive content, Patreon-only content regarding The Handmaid's Tale and our analysis of it, including some great discussion. You also get to input what we cover and how we cover it and kind of, in what way, and content-wise. Would you like, a live chat? Would you like more videos? What would you like? You get a say in that. So make sure to join us. Thanks to people like Bruce and Jay and Emily and Nadine who have joined us already.
Sasha. We're
so many great friends.
Siobhan. Thank you, Siobhan. We're excited.
We're super excited. So, this episode. Are you ready?
Dear Offred.
Dear Offred. Okay, so thematically, let's talk about June, and then we're going to talk about Serena, and then we're going to talk about Janine. Does that work?
Yeah. Janine and Lydia. Poof.
So June-wise, guys, June's in therapy.
I wish confetti would fall from the sky right now.
The heavens have opened.
We watched this together in the same physical location in Dr. Kristen's office, where she is now. I am next door in the conference room because I'm in Philly for work, and microphones. We're trying not to give our Eleanor a hernia with our traveling. But we watched it together, and when this happened, we just hit pause and we were like, is that couples therapy? Not just therapy for June, but like therapy for both of them? To be honest? And y'all, I will give our June credit. This whole episode, she was as honest as she possibly could be with what was happening. And to see her bounce back and forth between, as Vulture calls her, dark June, but trauma brain June, and June who's trying to heal, was really, really well done. It is very clear that they spoke to people who are trauma informed and who are trauma counselors, and that informed the writing and the acting, and it was really well done. And Kristen, I'm going to say something that's going to shock you. It's going to shock everybody else. I felt for June Osborne in this episode.
What?
I felt for her.
I did too. This is really hard stuff.
Yeah, man.
Healing is hard.
All the stuff. What did you say? They were they should have killed Fred Waterford 2 seasons ago.
Yeah.
It's given us this cohesiveness
Yep.
It's like, it's like we were goo and now we're Play-Doh. Like the ooze was just like spilling everywhere, getting on everything. But now it's Play-Doh and it's like we're forming it into something. And all of the things that June said that like were irrational in this episode, and there was a lot, it totally made sense. So, thanks for killing Fred Waterford, guys.
I don't miss him.
I don't miss him. Hat tip to the show writers. It's given us a cohesiveness. Both of us thought the show was really lacking by the end of season 4. So, yeah, June in therapy. Great, hilarious scene of her talking about how she's not sure how she's going to be violent again. How protective did you get? Past. Hilarious.
So what we also are reminded in this overlap of the magnets that are June and Serena together is that there are quite a lot of Gilead faithful, enough to be threatening. Proportionately, I don't know. Serena makes a couple claims in this episode that I need some receipts from the WHO and not just from her. But we are reminded that Gilead is an idea. We've said it before. We'll say it forever. Gilead is an idea. And to be honest, all nations are ideas. America is not particularly powerful just because we are this landmass with military and a tax system. We are powerful because we are an idea that people will defend with their bodies and their military might and their economy. And Gilead's the same way, even more so than the United States. And at one point, there's a huge thing in this episode about, like, June's really afraid that Gilead will happen. Now that Serena's in Canada, that Gilead will happen in Canada. And I have some, we can, tap Nadine or Eleanor or Jay in on this, but there's some structures of Canadian theocracy prevention that they have that we don't.
Yeah.
That, I understand why she thinks that way, but I also understand why the show is like, take a breath, it's not going to happen. And that's not where we're going.
Yeah, and I think, this show is so clearly informed by what's happening in America now, and so clearly reacts to what's happening in America and has for every season. And so, from June's perspective, all of these little means of resistance, the protests, the signs, Luke's obsession with the building codes, they tried that with Gilead and it didn't work. And I understand June's like trauma-driven fear. She does not see clearly or rationally when it comes to Serena Waterford. Understandably so. I don't expect her to. Luke's not being super helpful, but we'll save that for the Mayday moment. But, shades of January 6th, I know are all kind of in our minds in the ether as we're thinking about what the Gileadian takeover looked like, what the war looked like, and what it could possibly look like in Canada. But you're right. I mean, I think the show wants us to understand that it's not going to happen. There's a big difference in Canada and in Canada's relationship to Gilead. I mean, Tuello said it to Serena, right? He said, like, this is a free country. Like, watch your step here.
Yeah.
So, the Canadian government has given Gilead some leeway with this building. That was a pre-war holding, whatever that means. My guess would be some Gileadian commander owned that building and now it's part of the country, whatever. They've given them some leeway, but don't think the Canadian government's not going to snap back if Serena starts to abuse an ounce of what she's been given, which, as we said, is not very much.
Correct. So June has this perception that Serena is now free. Serena is not, is actually probably in the same amount of restriction she would be in Gilead. They just look different. And like we'll get to Serena in a couple minutes. So the rest of June's story is a couple minutes of high fantasy with this gun that should have absolutely never worked.
Brenda.
Ever.
We talked about this.
Ever.
I mean, we have no idea how much time has passed in this. A day, 10 weeks. We have no idea how pregnant Serena is. But that gun would not. You can't clean that gun and make it work. I'm not a gun expert, but just no.
Yeah,
No.
and also at some point she's going to shoot a gun in the air, and all I can think of is right now on our podcast we are covering gun violence, and I have Eleanor in our ear being like, "You cannot own guns in Canada."
Like, you can't. You can't just walk around with one. So, like...
If she shot it in a public place, she'd be arrested for owning a gun. Like, it's just... Yeah.
Yeah, you just can't walk around with a gun in Canada. We know this now.
So there was a couple moments of high fantasy about that.
It's a little discontinuity that this show is known for.
But then at the kind of the end of the episode, the really important thing with June is that she has a coming together with Luke that is symbolized. Their coming together emotionally has always been symbolized by their bodies. So we get treated to a June and Luke sex scene. After that gunshot, they confront Serena and they're sitting in the car, and June looks at Luke and says, I didn't shoot her today, but I can't promise I won't next time. And Luke very honestly says, I can't promise I won't either. And then this is evidently a turn on. And so then that is kind of the arc of June in this episode, reminding us that she is polarly and emotionally connected to Serena, does not know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Moira helps, has a lot of really helpful commentary back. Like, you cannot do this. You will jeopardize your family, but not just your family. This is a refugee town. We follow rules here. Like, we've got to do this to make sure everybody stays safe. And it was a good reminder that when June is June, she does think of other people and she does think of consequences. When she's lizard brain, trauma brain, jaw set June, depending, whatever you want to call it, she's not capable of it.
She's not capable of it, yeah.
Appreciated, this is the first time in at least 2 seasons I've said this, Elizabeth Moss's face work to show us the differences between those things.
She's so good at it, man.
She's really, really good at it. And so I appreciated that. Anything else on June herself before we move on to Serena Joy?
I mean, my kingdom to just move that camera back just a tad. I don't need to be up her nostril. She's doing the face acting work from 5 feet away. I don't need it from 1 foot away. No, I mean, I think you're right. It was good to have the counterbalance of Moira in this episode. And I'm not going to say Luke was a good counterbalance, even though he did try to make that argument. Like, what happens if you shoot her? They take Nicole away from us. We never get Hannah back. Like, you can't just go up and shoot her. But then, 10 minutes later, he's like, I'm gonna shoot her if you don't shoot her, so one of us has to kill her, which he was, again, not helpful. Yeah, I mean, I think the last thing that I want to say about June, and this will tie into Serena, is the song that they played at the end of the episode as they're juxtaposing Luke and June coming together in their moment of shared gun lust.
Vengeance lust? I don't know.
Vengeance lust and also trust, because I think that was a key thing Luke said, I guess we're just going to have to trust each other.
Yeah.
And then they had their sex fest. But they started playing a cover of Fleetwood Mac's The Chain, which is very useful at the end of episodes. In my head, it was used so fantastically at the end of one season of The Americans. So it's it's a really great end of episode message. But I mean, it was really intentional. Obviously, the music is always intentional with this show. And I think it was brilliantly selected for the purpose of, as we said, showing that Serena and June are magnets to each other. Their magnetic poles are so strong. And we even got it in the 2 seconds of when June was fleeing the scene of her gun attack and ran into Serena. And the communication those two actresses did on their faces, the subtle tilt of June looking at Serena's pregnant belly and recalculating, maybe I'll kill her after she gives birth. Having to make that split second decision. But that chain, and especially at the end, June is burning the invitation that she got from the Gilead Cultural Center. and the lyrics, "You will never break the chain," repeating. And, you know, the symbolism of this, multiple levels. June's trauma, and she's realizing, and the show's telling us, and that she's never going to break the chain of her trauma from Gilead. She can't escape it. She can't pretend it's not there. So she's dealing with it now, and she's not dealing with it well, but who is ever going to deal with it well in that situation? I think it's possible she's never, like, going to break the chain with Luke. There's part of that as well, that they are so connected even because they predate Gilead. They have a lot of way to go to understanding each other, mostly on Luke's end. And then the chain between her and Serena, which is in part the chain between her and Gilead, but, like, the chain between her and Serena. I mean, we've said it every episode we've talked about this season. They are setting those two up to be, like, I'm just in my head envisioning, like, the Glow, R.I.P. Glow, what a great show. The Glow, like, headline match. If this was happening on Glow, they would be the big ticket item.
Yeah.
And that's where they're setting it up, and I think that's what, you know, what does the chain look like by the time we're done with season 5 and season 6? We don't know. Because as we have shown in this first couple of episodes, you know, killing Fred Waterford did not break June's chain.
No, and at one point she looks at Moira and says, "Is this who I am now?" And my immediate response was, yes, but it's not who you always have to be.
Which was such a great, it was a great question and a great answer from you. So I hope June hears you.
Well, like, I was thinking, the way we teach trauma here at Abbey Research is that trauma is, like, if you imagine a beach next to a conical-shaped mountain, and your trauma is a big monster on that beach. It's a, you know, I always think of it as, like, Harry Potter Dementors. Like, it is breathing and seething and ugly, and it takes everything you have to get off the beach. Everything. Yeah. You get off the beach, you start to walk up the mountain, you get around the back of the mountain, you're like, oh my God, I'm free. Like, I don't smell it anymore, I don't see it anymore, I don't do it. Then you gotta come back around that mountain.
Yeah.
And you're not on the beach anymore. But damn it, it feels like it.
Yeah.
And you just have to keep doing the work to keep walking up that mountain. And it's so hard to get off the beach, it's so hard to keep walking. But you've got to do it. You've got to do the work to do that. The only way through it is through it.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm encouraged that June is doing. Is she's gotten off the beach. And for most of the last 2 seasons, she just parked at the front of the mountain her first time back around.
Yeah.
And now she's maybe starting to keep moving up and seeing what a different life could be.
Yeah.
So really hopeful for her.
Yeah, and
until I saw the previews for episode 5.
Yeah, but I think too, you know, it was such a moment of self-awareness for her to say, "Is this who I am now?" But for Moira to be the person who knows her best in the world to be there, and to say, like, and specifically to say, "I don't worry about you with Nicole anymore." And for her to help her recognize, for Moira to help June recognize that Nicole is going to be what grounds her into a human.
Yeah.
And not a lizard trauma brain. And she said, "I think I'm going to stay here for a while." And Moira said, "Sounds good, Mama." And so I think Moira's going to be so much more helpful in June's healing process than Luke. But yeah, I was really glad for that. And I hope Moira tells her, or Lisa, the therapist, tells her, like, this is not who you have to be forever.
Yeah.
But it is who you are right now. And self-aware June is new for us. It's been a minute since we've had self-aware June. Again, concerned about the previews for next week when her and Luke are teaming up in the Magic Subaru, but you know, they've got to get Hannah, y'all. So it was always going to go that way, but maybe she'll be slightly more self-aware in her recklessness. I don't know.
So Serena, Serena has this, kind of embassy thing, whatever. She ends up, she is realizing throughout this episode how little power she has, which is why I find it very telling that she uses as much God language as possible. She's never talked about God this much. And so that's her way to get back power is her womb and this presumption that God has made her pregnant. At one point, she makes the statement, there's a great call between her and Lawrence, and about various things. And she says, Gilead's the only country on the planet seeing an increase in live births. And I wrote, is that according to Serena or the World Health Organization? Because I'd like to know. I'd legitimately like to know. And then Lawrence, who continues to be an enigma wrapped inside of a puzzle, says to her, Venezuela is looking forward to being your ally and how in your girls' re-education or whatever. And Aaron and I paused and we said, if Venezuela, the Venezuelan government is interested in partnering with you, you are not doing something correct. You are doing something authoritarian and dictatory, because that is the Venezuelan government.
Yeah, that was kind of icky. She's reaching out to the global south, specifically, which I think she probably thinks she can do some kind of like mission work to under-resourced and underdeveloped nations, presuming that in the future they're still under-resourced and underdeveloped because they're brown people, and that's usually how racism works. But yeah, when Lauren said Venezuela is interested in our female re-education programs,
like full body shudder.
I was like, I don't want those exported. Nobody wants those exported. But yeah, I mean, they're clearly showing her she can't get the ecru color that she wanted. So the horrors of her life right now that ecru stationery was not available. But Gilead is declining invitations on her behalf. Ezra is clearly reporting to Lawrence about what's happening with Serena. So again, it's this fascinating balance between the power she thinks she has or she thinks she should have, and the constant reminders that she doesn't have it. And I think what's so interesting for what Yvonne Strahovski is doing is, yes, overusing the God language. She said it to Twello, she said it to Lawrence, she said it to everybody. But also, every time she shows badass Serena, immediately after, she is scared.
Yep.
So standing in her window in her pajamas, which was dumb, but she did it anyway, thinking she was invincible, looking down on all the lovely acolytes who support her, seeing June. Tough, then scared. Luke shows up to be stupid. She Serena's all over him. Scared. So I think it's hilariously enough in our other life today, we were talking about fear and leadership with our intern at the Community Research Institute down in Charleston. And I think Serena is motivated through her fear right now, lashing out through her fear, which she does so well. But doesn't mean we shouldn't be scared of her. It doesn't mean she can't do damage, even limited as she is. And especially now that she shows up at the end. So, yeah, June takes the gun that shouldn't work to the cultural center and fires the gun, as we saw, and Serena has to escape, and then she's taken to this house in the country. Who knows? Ezra called it like a refuge. He quoted, I'm assuming it was a biblical quote.
It was a biblical appropriation.
To a refuge. And this is where we meet Mrs. Ryan Wheeler. She calls herself Alanis. And then she was in the preview for episode 5. So I think we're going to get people that are going to keep Serena in this kind of attitude that she's in and help her build on this idea that she is God's gift and that this baby is God's gift.
Yeah.
And lots more God language. So buckle up, kiddo, because I think you're going to be real mad at Serena the rest of the season. But that's what we get out of Serena. We get a lot of fear and a lot of anger, and that's where she is.
Well, like a lot of, for the last couple seasons, I haven't been able to bring Pastor Kristen Hatt, so I'm glad it's back. Which, speaking of, just a hot tip for anyone who doesn't know, Ezra is a biblical name. There's a whole book of Ezra in the Old Testament. And Ezra is a really conservative Jew who was pissed that in the rest of Judah, the Jews were getting lax in their faithful practice. So I think that's a very intentional name. If they had gone with like Isaiah or Ezekiel, who were justice seekers, but they went with Ezra. And if you were curious and you did a lot of Googling, you're going to hit a lot of Ezra Miller right now. So good. I cut through for you. So that was Ezra in the Bible. Speaking of the Bible, can we go to Janine and Lydia?
Yeah, I'm game. Let's do it.
Okay. So Janine continued, like, we were, Janine was in survival mode the last couple episodes. And then Esther decided to poison her. And when Janine woke up, she woke up with a backbone again, and realizing that survival, that wasn't working, obviously.
Yeah.
And she's incredibly confrontational to Aunt Lydia, which I adore.
I loved it.
And spoke a whole hell of a lot of truth. And Lydia takes that and goes to Lawrence. She is very clearly unhinged when she does this. She is teetering on the brink of something. And she essentially says the only way to keep the girl safe, and I should say we are reminded again that for Lydia, this life that she has created for these handmaids is the way to give them a fulfilling and safe life. She is completely convinced of that.
She's a true believer.
In the world that she is living in, this is a woman's highest calling. And so to give the girls this opportunity to matter in this way, she really does believe is a gift. And so at some point in this whole process, this conversation, it appears to occur to her that the problem is not her. The problem is not the system. The problem is the commanders and the girls living at the commanders' houses. So if she could control all the handmaids and the commanders and their wives just come to the Red Center once a month, as Lawrence says, like a handmaid's hotel, to perform the ceremony, everything will be fine. Lawrence, so like Lydia is the only person in this entire apparatus who cares about the girls.
Yeah.
And Lawrence gives her a real deep dose of reality to remind her that this whole system is set up for the commanders.
Yeah, and the handmaids are women that were supposed to be punished.
Like, they're commodities.
Like, these were women who violated what Gilead had decided were societal norms. June was an adulterer.
Yep.
Moira and Emily were queer. Like, these are not, like, Lydia's the only one that thinks of these women as godly. Or people. They are to be punished for their transgressions and used for their wombs.
Yep.
And apparently Lydia needed reminded of that. And Commander Whitford, as I am now going to call him, was only too happy to do so.
It was a great conversation. Ann Down and Bradley Whitford could have every scene together. That would be fine.
All the scenes. These are pious men. They need to have their kink.
Honestly, I've been studying churchmen for a really long time. That's super true. Super true.
Super true. We could have a whole separate discussion about Commander Whitford and what is his game. Y'all, we have no idea.
The only reason it's not a Mayday moment is that we would just keep looking at each other being like, we don't know.
We don't know. Yeah, we don't know. So we would love your theories. Hit us up in the comments. What is Lawrence Whitford's game? Whose side is he on? Is he on his side? He said some really hideously distasteful things to Lydia that made my uterus kind of go like this. Does he mean them? Who's he playing? Is he helping?
It's so funny. Like, you really reacted to that, and I don't know if it's because I'm so used to this, like, hypocritical religious nonsense. It didn't even faze me. Like, you were, like crumbling next to me, and I was like, what is a problem with what he just said? It's very Galadian. Like, I don't know. It was just, it's funny that we reacted so differently.
Yeah, and it is very Galadian, but maybe because I was used to him being countercultural. And he wasn't. And again, it's this, you know, they're bringing back the religiosity of it for better or worse. But, you know, Lydia's insistence that she felt like God would be better served by keeping the handmaids away from the commanders.
She's not wrong.
She's not wrong, but in Gilead, she's wrong.
Yeah. I mean, God would be better served if the handmaids were allowed to be autonomous, self-determined women that he created them to be. But that's neither here nor there.
That's not in the system or the idea of Gilead either. But there is this is a really tense time for Gilead as well, and we get that in several references throughout the episode, from Tuello, who says, like, the funeral went really well for them internationally. And, you know, Lawrence said, we're cracking open the doors a little bit here, so we can't afford
any bruises to show.
Any scars, any bruises. We can't, so, you know, and it's in his conversation with Serena. Serena brings up that, like, a lot of the political wives in the global South are only hearing the horrible stories about the handmaids. You know, to a lot of us, there would only be horrible stories. Doesn't matter. But you know, there's a lot of these political machinations happening, which is, you know, shows you that how traumatized Lydia was by what happened to Janine. She's normally very politically adept, and this has traumatized her so much that she is, like, about turning away from understanding the political necessity of Gilead, which she was so strident in, and the performative necessity of Gilead as well. Like, she's the one that crafted that giant fake capital punishment scene at the Boston baseball park, whatever it's called.
Fenway, yeah, at the old Fenway. So, boy, have we seen a real turn in Lydia, which you and I both agree and feel that, you know, since we know that the Testaments are coming after season 6, we have talked about how the Testaments Lydia and the Handmaid's Tale Lydia do not jive. And so I think they're trying to make them jive a little bit more. And I was thinking about it while we watched it, if I thought it was too abrupt, her change, or not. But I think they've done the work on this one. I agree, because it's Janine.
Yeah, because it's Janine. A lot of times they haven't done the work for some of the big changes that they put their characters through on this show. But they did the work because it's Janine. Yep. And they have constantly shown us her relationship with Janine is different. And they gave us the scene of her bargaining with God at Janine's bedside. And she is a true believer. She believes God saved Janine. And she believes, in part, it's because she promised she would do things differently.
Yeah, and the at one point she quotes a verse from Luke 8, actually, where she, fear not, just believe, and she will be made whole. So that's a reference to a story in Luke 8 where a distraught father, we are told, of a 12-year-old girl comes to Jesus and says, my daughter has died. And Jesus, like, looks at him, goes to the house, looks at him, and essentially, in some translations, says, she's not dead, she's just sleeping. Fear not, just believe, and she will be made whole. And there's, I mean, people write whole PhDs on every single verse of everything. So there's lots of theories on the symbolism of that, and if that meant to be whole in this life or whole in the next life. Or for Lydia, scripture is obviously very literal. And so she went as a mother of a sick girl to the throne of God and begged for her healing, and God acquiesced. We obviously, as we've said, we don't know who Jesus is in Galatian theology. There is never mention of him. Even when they do reference the New Testament, it is never the mention of Jesus' name ever. There is no Trinity in Galatian theology, it appears. If there's been one-off mentions of it, it's not baked in enough where there is.
I don't even think they only ever mention God.
Mm-hmm. And they mention him, her by that name. They never use another name. They don't really use another title. They I think once or twice they've said father. It's mostly, under his eye, or it's pronouns and God. And there's a lot to be said about why they're structuring it that way, and why they're doing that. And I might get into that another time. But that was a very specific verse to remind us that this is Lydia's relationship with her faith, is that if God did save Janine, he saved her for a purpose. And Janine is there using that purpose to tell Lydia that things are broken. Mm-hmm. And so in her faith system, she would have to listen to Janine.
Yeah.
So that's, I think they set it up perfectly. I thought it was great. I can't wait.
I think they did. I'm excited for it. I'm a bit nervous that because we know that this is ending after season 6, that they might have to accelerate it. Because I could see if there's anyone that's going to convince Lydia that things have to change, and that things and that maybe the system isn't fixable, it could be Janine. It could, but that's going to take time, and I don't know if we have that much time for that to happen. But, the fact that Janine could say to her, I see who you are. I have one good eye, remember? I missed snarky Janine. I'm so glad she's back. I'm sorry she had to get arsenic poisoning, lose control of her legs, and be in a coma to be snarky again, but I'm glad that it happened. And the fact that Lydia looks at her and says, I need your help with this. I should have listened to you. And we get a very different Aunt Lydia that walks back into the Red Center than left. And, it's very clear in how little she did and little she talked to those girls and left Janine to do it. So I'm really excited about this. As weird as we felt about the poisoning scene and out of context it was, although shout out to Sasha on the Patreon for suggesting that maybe Esther poisoned her and Janine to kill 2 wombs. And that was what June would have wanted. Yep. I appreciated that, and that made sense. If you want to have more conversations like that over on our Patreon, come join us. Patreon plug there. But yeah, as jarring as that scene felt and incongruous as it felt at the time, I'm glad that it's brought us here, and I'm super excited for where they're going with Janine and Lydia. And Ann Dowd in this episode again was just, she continues to be one of the most talented actors that we have in this world. And I'm glad they're giving her some different stuff to chew on. She was doing a great job showing depth with Lydia, even though Lydia wasn't changing. But a changing Lydia is a force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Well, I'll tell you what. I think that this is a great place to pause. I will tell you that neither one of us is excited for the preview for next episode.
No.
But because it appears to be more Magic Subaru driven, and those are our least favorite plots. But we'll see where it's going. If you want to join us over on Patreon for a conversation about Luke, it's patreon.com/Abby Research, ABBEY Research. We'd love to have you join us there and hear your thoughts about Luke. And gosh, man loves a building code. I think that's all we've got for now. We'll
Yep.
see you on Patreon or next week. Anything else, Aaron?
Nope, I'm good. Thanks, everybody.
Talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.